next up, we have the topic of disruption in the near and long term of corporate venturing. And Dominique, who's been from Swisscom, who's been one of our closest advisors for many years, said, I don't want to be on a panel, I want a game. And he said, so what we're having is a competition between 4 of the leading lights in the corporate venturing industry. They are Siegel, who will be coming up first, Nagraj Kashyap, second, Dominique Megret, third, and Ralf Schnell, fourth. And they will be sharing anything they want on this particular topic in a 7.5-minute timed session. And then we're going to ask the audience to judge who they felt was best with a show of hands. And we'll see who has the most prescient strategic vision of what's going on in disruption in the near and long term of corporate venturing. So first up, Siegel.
Okay, so they switched this up on me at the last minute. So and this is a competition, so vote for me, all right? All right, it's gonna be huge, seriously. All right, so this is the topic, which is all around, I think what a lot of us think about all the time, which is all about scaling ventures as a service, because we're a service organization within each of our corporations, as we are in this world of disruption in the midst of industry. So quickly look at this. Don't blink too fast. We all know this is happening all the time. Some of these companies were only around for a few years. A number of our companies have been around for over 100 years. So they're gone. And why is that? They either didn't keep in touch with the technological advances or the business model advances that actually were occurring very, very quickly. Every single industry, because of the digitization of data, is going through this disruption. And you can't list all of them across the board, but there isn't one that isn't being affected. And if you think about it, it started first in consumers, where certainly the internet has taken full blow of this. But in addition to that, it's continuing to actually take hold of every single industrial industry. And even GE is in the midst of this digitized industrial, right? Becoming the digital industrial of the future. So one of the things that's happening, and very, very quickly, is that in fact, the business models are changing. So what's happening? You've got centralized and distributed, and you guys all know this. Utilities are going to solar, hospitals are going to retail centers, or even to the home. You're getting models that are CapEx to OpEx. So instead of paying for the asset, you're actually paying for the experience. Per scan, per drink, per electron, per car drive, whatever it might be. And this is pretty routine. And then last but not the least, you have static and dumb, or else essentially you sell the asset and you don't get any more revenue from it other than a service contract or something like that. Now, because of the way it's happening in terms of CapEx to OpEx model, you've got connected and smart too because of the sensors, and therefore all of a sudden you have a ton of data that you're able to monetize. Data is raw material and becomes the currency of today. So when you look at that, the classic models, either CapEx and asset sale or leasing or some time of financing for a one-time sort of purchase. And then now you name the different business models. I've only listed but a few, which is whatever as a service, freemium to premium, you guys all know it. We've all been suckers to some of those. Subscription, pay as you go, or the marketplace, where you're having prosumers, those that produce and those that actually purchase, and you have them all in the same marketplace and allowing those to exist. Now, in addition to this, you've got building partnerships and collaborative networks. And really the words to look at is platforms, networks, and orchestration. This whole world is really what's coming to pass right now. It's not just developing the platform with the application. It's really making sure that the networks of networks exist. If you do that well, then you can start to orchestrate the ecosystems. Clearly, Uber has done that, the Airbnbs have done that, and they are the ones commanding the multiples associated to it. We don't have time to go into all of this full blown. So what have we had to do with regards to the development of sort of an innovation strategy within GE? is set up not only GE Ventures, because there's many areas, there's no one department of innovation in any one company, right? We can't really kid ourselves that that's the case. But we're all about accessing the entrepreneurial ecosystem, bringing it in-house, and vice versa, bringing the business units external, and trying to figure out how, in fact, to maximize the way we interact with the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And what we've tried to do at GE, utilizing all the different parts of the ecosystem, is set up a number of different organizations within Ventures, within a platform that's around, for example, venture investing, you all know that, and that's equity investing across the board. We deploy about $200 million a year. We've got new business creation, which is exactly what it means, to create new businesses where we aren't, where we would prefer to be, where we think we can expand because of adjacencies and assets that we potentially have, or stranded assets that we need to actually expand upon. And in addition to that, we've done some carve-outs, and I'm going to mention that in a second. It's part of what keeps me up at night, and part of what, when Toby said, think about, what is your biggest issue? I'll tell you about that in a minute. We also have the licensing group in place at GE, so this is GE licensing, and this is really taking IP and being able to license it out, but in a little bit different way. It's not just about royalty streams. It's about using sweat equity. It's about being able to build companies around that too. It's about being able to barter and trade IP for some type of value, be it distribution rights, be it co-development rights, other types of activities. And then we have Healthy Imagination, which think about that as a think tank for health and looking at global health challenges across the board so that you can really anticipate where this might be going. And we try to participate in 3 different ways. One, as a large self-insured employer, with about 600,000 employees and retirees that we have to pay for and we have to keep healthy and to figure that out. 2, as a manufacturer, an $18, $19 billion manufacturer of healthcare goods. And last but not the least, as a brand that's recognized in about 180 different countries. Catalyst is the latest activity that we've set up. This is really all around finding the scientist entrepreneur who is really thinking about the future breakthrough that we've got to potentially allow to flourish. We know it doesn't necessarily happen within GE, despite the fact we're one of the only corporates that still has a big lab within GE. We also know that taking those assets and actually enabling other scientists externally to accelerate that probably helps everybody. And figuring out that model to make that happen is something that we're in the midst of doing. We're starting in healthcare. So we have all of these things that we've got to do something about. Now, Jeff Immelt, our chairman and CEO, gave us the following challenge. He said, we've got so much that we've invested in so many different assets. We've done a tremendous amount. We need to figure out how to really bring that all together, take assets that are potentially in different business units, pull them together, new business model, and voila, new business. And we thought, okay. And he said, try to do this, and you got a few months to do it. Thank you, Jeff. And of course, you say, we're going to do this. And the team got together and said, all right, how do we start thinking about this? And from our growth playbook strategy at GE, because of the business models that I talked about changing, really going into this world of distribution, right, of distributed assets, and really into an OpEx model, one of the things we came up with in terms of energy is this new startup called Current. It's a $1 billion startup. We had to carve out a number of different things from various business units, including our LED business, including our storage business, our solar business, and a number of other things in energy to bring it together in a new business model, OpEx, into a new customer base, our commercial and industrial customers, into a new financing vehicle, which we use GE Finance to actually finance. And what we're able to do is reduce, produce, and shift for our commercial and industrial customers, really a new way of participating in energy and really being able to pay for energy in a different way. And you set up these clusters, and over time you got networks and networks, and then ultimately becoming the network orchestrator because we also have utilities. So 3 questions to maximize. I got 40 seconds to do this, and that is the questions that keep me up at night. As we've developed up this particular model, and we have these different tools in our toolkit, how do we in fact truly become not just another sort of group within GE that sort of does their own activity, but truly is fully integrated into the corporate strategy horizontally. Remember, we have 7 different businesses within GE in many different industries: energy, aviation, locomotives, lighting, healthcare, et cetera. And how do you find growth that you can unlock, that you actually know is in there, to produce these billion-dollar startups to drive organic growth? Organic growth. So these are some of the questions that I'm looking for. Remember, vote for me. Thank you.
Wonderful, Sue. Well done. So the competition's hotting up. Next up, we have Nagraj Kashyap from Microsoft.
Hello, everybody. If you can hear me, by the way, the 10 other G folks cannot vote for Sue. Okay, I'm all alone here, so. Or if you want to vote, vote for me. So when Toby told me to put this together, it was just like, try to be controversial, get some votes. So I'm going to try that here. And I apologize for we are a global conference here. I said Detroit, so folks don't know what Detroit is famous for. It's the heart of the US auto industry, so that's what I'm going to focus on. Sue actually set me up nicely, and I'm going to talk about transformation a little bit here. So we're also part of the world's biggest software company. So I like this quote a lot. Now, I would argue that if there's any VCs here, no disrespect, a lot of VCs are self-serving when they say things. Mark Andreessen, a little bit different. Used to be an entrepreneur, turned a VC. So pay attention to that. Now, the quote at Microsoft we like even better than this one was from GE. So please do vote for me, GE folks. Again, one more plug here. This is actually a much better quote, and it's reflective of what we think is happening to the world, which is everything is becoming software. And why is that? So if you look at this chart, and many of us have seen this in many different mechanisms, but the reason it's interesting is you see the pace of innovation is changing the cost of hardware dramatically. It is at the point where, I'll take a few examples. A drone that used to cost $100,000 is now $700. You can buy a consumer drone, fly around anywhere you want. A phone that for equivalent functionality was $500 in 2007, the same phone costs $10 now. So what is happening? So the hardware is, I wouldn't say getting completely commoditized, but becoming to a point where the differentiating factor is software. And so this has led to this chart, which shows the creation of these unicorns, or nowadays we call them unicorpses, regardless. The point is that every company on this chart, I would argue, is a software company. And that's one of the many controversial things I'd say. There's 2 companies you would argue with, Xiaomi and Tesla. I would say, are those really hardware companies or a manifestation of software via hardware? So I think let's go and talk about one particular industry and one of these unicorns, Uber, and how that's transforming, and actually Uber and Tesla, how they're transforming the auto industry. So what's happened to transportation? For folks in London, black cabs are great, and I actually took one today, although it took me 20 minutes more and probably 10 pounds more to get here. But what's happened in San Francisco? The market for black cab, or the equivalent of black cabs in San Francisco, is now basically limited to folks who don't have a smartphone, maybe some seniors, and folks who are tourists, who don't have a data plan. Other than that, very few people in San Francisco will take a cab. New York City, this is the price of what is called a medallion, what you would get to be a taxi driver in New York City. It's had a dramatic effect on transportation. In both these places in San Francisco, people don't want to drive anymore. Having a car is sort of actually a pain, rather than, so for me personally, I don't have a car in San Francisco. I'm Uber elite, or whatever they want to call me. So I really think it's had a profound effect. A little bit switching to the electronics and software, if you look at what's happening on a car side, you're seeing by 2020 projections of 50% of the cost of a car, electronics and software. That is a good segue to what Tesla is doing. So I'm going to argue again, and you look at this example of whether Tesla is really a software company or a hardware company. So they had this issue recently where they put together Curve autopilot, and then they found out through social media, really through social media, let me see if this, oh, that doesn't work. Oh, no pointer here. So through social media, they found out that customers were complaining about their autopilot feature. They got the usage data from all the sensors, analyzed it, found out, confirmed that really there was an issue with the autopilot, and a lot of drivers were actually overriding the autopilot when it came to sharp turns. They then corrected the software, and then they updated the car over the air. That is a concept which, my first investment when I started at Qualcomm was updating the phone over the air. Phone breaks, no big deal. You go to a customer care center, a car you're driving is now updated over the air. And then the usage data is tracked more, it's more optimized, and so on and so forth. Really, this is enabled through cheap sensors and software. And yes, we're going to drive the car, so no disrespect to mechanical engineers. I'm a software engineer. I believe this is sort of going to be more and more the case where software rules the roost. So what is Detroit, in this case the auto industry, doing? I would argue that the auto industry has done phenomenally well in terms of these threats, in terms of the plan they have. If you see this next slide, they're really being proactive. I give a lot of credit through the use of corporate venturing efforts that GM and Ford are really taking this, they're not taking this lying down. They're not saying, let's see what happens and we won't have to do anything. They're actually going out ahead and being proactive. The one example here on GM, on the Cruise, at Qualcomm we were investors in Cruise, and the actual transaction happened through an investment. There was an investment discussion going on, and then GM realized it's better off that we best buy the company, so they bought the company. Again, the investment in Lyft, acquisition of Cruise, how every Detroit auto manufacturer now has an R&D center in Silicon Valley. They really are trying to embrace change. They're not sitting down. Ford recently announced a big investment in a cloud computing player. So again, all of these players are taking note and sort of really pushing the limits on what they can do through their corporate venturing units. Now, I'd say some of the folks here will have the same experience I had. Growing up in India, we had two choices. You do engineering or medicine. Really, that was what I had my choice. So I didn't like medicine, so I chose engineering. I didn't get a lot of chance to read philosophy books, so I didn't grow up with any favorite philosopher. The one thing I did grow up with was TV, and I used to watch sports, and I used to watch boxing. So all of this is good. This is Detroit's plan. So the controversial thing is, since I watched boxing, I like this quote here. So you guys can decide whether I'm positing, I'm giving Detroit credit, they have a plan. What happens is, depending on how you vote for me, I'll tell you the result of this. Thank you.
When people start wolf whistling, you know they're really getting into it. So next, it's Dominique Megret, Swisscom Ventures.
Good morning, everybody. So it's a real pleasure to be here. We've got about, over 80% of the top 100 CVCs in the world are gathered here today, so it's a great feeling. It's a sense of community. I will focus on Swisscom Ventures to give you a little bit of background, how we deal with disruption, and talk about the CVC industry as a whole. I come from Switzerland. You might have recognized the Matterhorn. Swisscom is a 30 billion euro market share telecommunications IT group. Swisscom Ventures has invested in about 40 companies in the last 10 years, about half in the USA and the other half in Europe, mostly in Switzerland, our home country. In the US, we typically focus on core telecom and IT. That's why we need a clear differentiation as a small, I would say, European investor. And how do we do that? We typically co-invest as a first customer, so very early stage, and we help the company to develop a first customer pitch, and then we go around to the other telcos, try to form consortium of telecom companies around ourselves, and help internationalize the company. So for example, in the cloud space, we've invested in 7 companies in the last 4 years. 4 companies have been sold to the usual suspects, and we typically try to replicate that model in diverse industries. In Switzerland, you might ask yourself, why are we investing in a country which is better known for cheese, chocolate, and banking? It's not very VC-friendly, but actually it's a misrepresentation. I mean, this small country, 7 million inhabitants, is actually a very industrial-based country with 55% of the GDP is export, so you have to be innovative to survive. Otherwise, there is no chance with overpriced currency to be able to export. And so we try to be competitive with innovation, with good universities, high density of famous scientists in the country, and lots of research centers. For example, Disney and Google have got their largest R&D centers in the world outside the US, based in Zurich. IBM, one of the largest as well. And we have public institutions like CERN. It's fundamental physics, but that's also where the internet was invented 25 years ago, just as a side product. Physics lead to anything. I don't know, there are a few physicians here. You see the ETH Zurich and EPFL, that's 2 leading universities. What's interesting is that you see this picture, about 70% of those buildings you see here did not exist 5 to 10 years ago. So there is a momentum to create an American-style campus with a strong dynamic behind, and it works. So obviously we cannot compete against the super highly financed American and Chinese internet and IT ventures. So we try to focus on the niche spaces where Europe actually has some word to say, which is intersection between traditional industries like health, engineering, and so on, and the digital world. So we invest, for example, in e-health, virtual augmented reality, wearables, big data, IT security, and fintech and sports tech. So a few lessons learned, because Toby slightly changed the mandate at the last minute, but it's good exercise to kind of improvise. I was more on the lessons learned thing about the industry. Let me share with you my last 10 years experience. This is the learning curve of the industry. We all are at a different stage. It's not a homogeneous industry. That's why it's good to be here today, because the ones who've got more experience can talk with the ones with less. But as an industry, I would say we're about there. It's a relatively young industry, 25 years of experience, and getting to a stage of maturity. That means, and that's important, that we have a honest representation of ourselves. We still have a few things to fix, but we fundamentally have superb starting point, almost unfair advantages point, called ABC. We have access. Access to the top experts, thousands of engineers you were talking about. That's I always enjoy going through my colleagues, just to have access to any kind of expert you want to have. For due diligence, very useful. Commercialization channels and top management expertise as well. Brand is super important, and access to capital. We don't spend much time fundraising because you get automatically more funding from your top management if you deliver good results. I'm sure many of us can share this experience where you get asked to invest more. That's good feeling. However, I feel we have self-imposed constraints. We should fix those issues as an industry. For example, the governance. It's a fact that there is a huge governance instability. For example, Swisscom Ventures, I had 9 different direct reports in the last 10 years. I kind of did C-level tourism, CEO, CTO, CFO. I got them all. And the only way to survive was to put an investment committee detached from that, independent from the people. If we didn't have this super stable investment committee, we would not have survived those 9 government changes, or let's say sponsored changes. Very important. Some of the others of you, they decided to go to step aside from the organization as an independent entity. That's another way to deal with the problem. Second, incentive is not really working satisfactorily. I mean, the Verlander compensation report on the industry, a very interesting report, says that 75% of us are not satisfied with the incentive structure. We don't think this is actually linked to the real actual performance of the fund, for example. Most of us are linked to the parent performance, which doesn't really make sense. And we have to deal with a curse of short-term cycles into either hype or doom, like corporates. And that's dangerous because hype means you've got pressure from the top management to do big and fast deals, to move the needle, basically to bring growth to billion-dollar companies. How do you want to bring growth to such big company? And you have pressure to do that. And if you don't do this, others will do it. From the M&A department or BD, you have also kind of internal competition, very bad. Also, if you have a doom period, cost restructuring, refocus, CVC stop. So the key point is to keep a growth corridor, trying to avoid the extremes and think about 10 to 20 years perspective. So last point is what should we do as an industry? Three things: communicate our successes. And not just about IR, but I think it's important that we understand what's the value if you manage to stop an R&D project because you discovered a startup doing the same thing more efficiently. Or if you help doing acquisitions, like Claudia, you told me one of the key things is that you help doing acquisitions, which were smart for IBM. How do you value the fact that you help teams to negotiate better partnership deals with early stage companies? Those are tangible values, which we call strategic, but it is real money. And I think we need to quantify that, we need to talk about it, and maybe it would help if our CEOs hear that from third parties. They would not take it, because sometimes they are part of the problem, they would not take it personally if they understand the value created in other companies. Share best practices, that's where we're here today, and institutionalize the CVC profession. A few of us, we've thought about creating the International Corporate Venture Capital Association. The foundation has been set up in the US, but not really started officially because we wanted to get your feedback first to understand how can we be the face of the industry, to talk to the key stakeholders, top management, VCs, and the entrepreneurs. So please come back to all the people on this panel. They are affiliated with this initiative, and we hope we will be able to launch it soon to serve you. Thank you very much.
So, quite an announcement from Dominique. And next up, we're going to be having the Ralf Schnell, Siemens Venture Capital.
Toby, thank you. Hey. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, what is innovation? I think the best description I've ever heard is it is simply go to market with new customer value. Whether it's technology or whatever it helps you in creating that customer value, it doesn't matter. Go to market with new customer value. My colleagues have opened a landscape of change in our industry. I like to narrow it a little bit. I am focusing only on one single aspect that I think is very, very important and covers a lot of aspects in our industry. If I say our, I mean especially Siemens Industries, which is industrial automation, energy, healthcare, and mobility. And that is the aspect of individualization. Think about what we have done in the last 100 years. We have optimized mass production. We have scaled up our production. We have been very, very efficient, but also very rigid in our systems. And what we see now, going back to that definition of innovation, is bringing new customer value to market. Our customers have a different view on what the value is they want to see than they had before. And I'd like to give you a couple of examples in those four industries. Let's first start with industrial design and manufacturing. As I said, we have optimized manufacturing to large lot sizes, to very efficient slicing and dicing and a Tayloristic view on it. Things are changing. Our customers are deserving production capabilities of lot size of 1. 3D printing may help there. What we also see is, and a good example is the fashion industry, they'll get very fast and immediate feedback by crowd-based customer feedback, instant and immediate feedback, and then they next day can change the design accordingly, and then they do another crowd-based customer feedback. Works perfectly these days. And all in all, we go to open design platforms. I can, if I wanted to design something, I can do it. I go to one of those, I take an open design tool by myself. A little bit of training is necessary, not that much. And then I go to one of those printing shops, and I have that design done in a couple of days, individually, as I like it, only for me. That's the individualization here, and that changes our way of delivering customer value. Next is the energy space. You know, we talked about, Toby gave us this word of disruption. If there is one really disruptive move, first of all, you can only see if something is disruptive after, in retrospect, after 10 years, whether something has really disrupted our ecosystem. But there was one, in the energy space, there was one very, very disruptive thing, and that was the introduction of feed-in tariffs. It was not the invention of solar, it was not the invention of wind, it was the introduction of feed-in tariffs. Politicians probably did not know what they were doing then and how large the consequences were. We in Germany, for example, seeing our whole energy system being upside down simply by one thing. The politicians introduced some time ago a feed-in tariff, nothing else. We do have, in the energy space, very decentralized power generation. We have almost autonomous customers. Customers don't need that often the basic energy and power supply that the system is offering. We have prosumers. That means the consumer is not only a consumer, he is also a producer of energy. And that is a very interesting checks and balances system that we have at the end customer. I think we will end up in the energy space. We are not yet there, in a very similar stage as we are in the telco industry. Tons of tariffs, a jungle of tariffs, so to say, for the good and the bad, of course. Again, here also much more than in a decade ago or 2 decades ago, the end customer influences in a very immediate and very short-term and powerful way the way we deliver our value to the customer, much more than it has been in the decades before. Same with healthcare. We have a couple of real problems in healthcare. Last but not least, the inefficiency and the cost of the whole system. Maybe personalized medicine is the solution. It's in the very infancy of deployment and of real use, but it could help bringing the cost down, and it could help making our life better, because medication these days is so incredibly costly and incredibly inefficient at the moment. We as patients are much, much more educated than 20 years ago, for example. Think about if you come back with a diagnosis from your doctor and practitioner, what are you doing? You're searching the internet. Is that really correct, what he told me? My insurance company, for example, offers me already for free, they reimburse it, a second opinion. If I get, let's give the example of orthopedic knee diagnosis. 40% of all diagnoses of problems in your knee are wrong. If I know that, I'm happy that my insurance company offers me a second opinion. I can go to another doctor and he tells me, hey, this CT or these MR pictures, how do you interpret this? We have much more educated end customers here, so to say, means patients. And of course, we have to master the cost basis. It's a real issue we have. And the insurance system also will be changing dramatically, and I know all around the world there are many insurance systems. Mobility, the last example. The industry has in the past provided us with transport solutions. I do think a transport solution is something completely different to a mobility solution. Transport solution is a car or something that brings me from here to there. That's not what I need. I need a mobility solution on demand when I decide I have to do something. Is it by train? Is it by car? Whatever it is. Mobility is a convenience factor for us, and at some point in time we probably won't pay too much for it. We want to have it on demand, and we have to have business models that allow us as those who bring the infrastructure to still make our living with such demanding customers. All in all, if you're coming out of an industry where we as Siemens are in, you have to rethink and reorganize the value chain quite a bit. We don't know what is really successful at the end of the day, but we have to test it, verify it, and then change it. I do think we have to learn in our CapEx industry, as Sue defined it at the beginning very nicely, we have to learn from the consumer business very much. We have to, and we are forced to, have much better customer feedback cycles, and the customer is pushing us for innovation much more and much more precisely than he has been able in the last years. And all of that is only happening and being successful managed by a large corporation if you go to a very strict open innovation platform approach. And coming back now, closing the loop to corporate venture capital, Kenneth described it as a tool. Sue described it as a service. It is a tool and a service that we offer our corporation, our parent company, to master these challenges. It's one of the tools, but it's quite an interesting and important tool. Thank you.
Stay here? Yeah. So now, final one. And I'm now going to welcome everyone up onto the stage. So Dominique, Nagraj, Sue, all of you in the audience, I want you to be thinking very hard as we dissect very briefly like in literally sort of very quickly. I think it probably makes sense for us to just sort of vote which members are, who were speaking just now, who we thought were the best. So let's start from left to right, and starting with Nagraj. Who's voting for Nagraj? It's getting pretty competitive. Who's voting for Sue?
Yay!
You can see threatening people at the beginning helps a bit. And then, who's voting for Dominique?
No!
And who's voting for Ralf? So I think we have a very sort of dead heat between Nagraj and Sue. So I'm going to call on Jim Mawson to make a final casting vote.
Can we take out the G people from the...
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I think this isn't quite like Al Gore hanging chads or anything like that. So what we're going to do is combine everyone's votes. So you now split. Who's voting for Nagraj? Okay, that's good. And then who's voting for Sue? Woo! I think there's more Sue. Sue, well done.